Yes, we're live. We're live as right now.
Mm.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you so much for joining another episode of the Performance Tools LinkedIn Live. This is episode 12 of the Performance Tools LinkedIn Live with Adedoyin. I'm streaming live from Lagos, Nigeria. It is 6 p.m. here in Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you so much, my viewers or our viewers. Wherever you may be, please go ahead. Let's know where you're watching from. If you're in Nigeria, if you're in Lagos, any part of the world where you are, please let's know where you're watching from. And I'm excited today to welcome Dr. Diane Hamilton. Dr. Diane, good. It's evening here in Nigeria.
It's morning here. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. It's so nice to be here.
Thank you so much, so much. Okay, so today we're going to look at the topic around curiosity. Okay, let's just check a few of our viewers. Okay, there's someone,
Singapore.
Oscar Oruche, yes, from
Hi, Oscar.
Singapore. Yes. Hi, Oscar. How are you doing? Oscar is a regular viewer. I mean, almost um, every of my session, it comes live. You know, Oscar is watching from Singapore. Thank you, Oscar. Okay, while we're waiting for others, so I have Dr. Diane here with me this for this session. I know I'm just going to talk a little about Dr. Diane. She's going to do uh, the, the 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 best introduction. So Dr. Diane is the founder of she's the founder and CEO of Tonera. Tonera is also a consulting firm. She's the former MBA program chair at the Forbes School of Business, and she has authored multiple books. And one of the books is our focus of discussion today, Cracking the Curiosity Code, the key to unlocking human potential. Dr. Diane, thank you so much for honoring my invitation.
Oh,
So,
I'm
I
excited to
mean,
be here.
yeah, yes, okay. Thank you, Simon Obianwa from Lagos. Thank you, Bashrat Zaga. Hi, how are you doing? Thank you so much. So, Dr. Diane, let's meet you before we take a deep dive, yes, into the conversation today.
Okay. You want to know my backstory,
Yes,
I
over to
guess.
you, Dr. Diane.
Uh-huh. Well, it's very interesting that I got into curiosity and some of the things I'm doing. In addition to my consulting business, I have a radio show. So I do like what you're doing. I get to talk to people from all walks of life and from great stories I get to share on my radio show. But what happened was my background was in sales. I've sold everything from computers to pharmaceuticals to I worked for AstraZeneca for 20 years. They're in the news quite a bit right now with the COVID vaccines and things. And I was in the lending and banking and mortgage industry. So I've been in just about every industry out there sometime in my career. And then I got very interested in teaching. So I've taught at a lot of different universities, worked as an MBA program chair, short stint as a dean. I worked, as you mentioned, at the Forbes School of Business, have been working with them for quite a while, where I did a lot of work with their speakers, their speaker program, got to know Steve Forbes and some of the really interesting people there. And so when I left that, I started my consulting and speaking business and my radio show. And as I was interviewing people on my radio show, I started to notice how the really successful people were super curious. And I thought, well, I had written several books in the past, and I wanted to write another book about curiosity just because I thought it was so fascinating to see how much it was tied into success. But as I started to write the book, I started to notice that my students weren't always as curious as the people on my shows, the really successful people. And so I wanted to help them to become more curious. And since I had written my dissertation, and for my doctoral dissertation was on emotional intelligence, I had a lot of experience with emotional intelligence tests and different personality assessing. And so I decided to create my own assessment to determine the factors that inhibit curiosity, because there wasn't anything out there. I was really surprised because all the curiosity assessments were all about how high or low your level of curiosity was. And if you had a low level, then what were you supposed to do? So I had to create an assessment to determine the things that kept people from being curious so that I could help them improve it. So that's what I do. I've worked with companies. I've done everything from little videos for major organizations like Verizon to being one of the speakers and consultants for companies like Novartis, and big companies throughout the world have hired me to come and speak and train and help their employees improve curiosity. So that's kind of my story.
Wow. Wow, the greatest part of that was when you mentioned that when you started interviewing several leaders, um, they kept on talking about curiosity. And in the course of my research as well over the years, I've seen that I've also come across the fact that a lot of leaders sort of link their success to curiosity. I mean, from
Yeah. Warren
Bill
Buffett. Yeah.
Gates to
Right.
Warren Buffett. I mean, he
Mm-hmm.
talked about reading about 600 pages of books on a daily basis. The same
Yeah.
thing with Bill Gates, and a lot
Yeah.
of other leaders like that. So, if we are to start our conversation today on that note, could we then say that curiosity is positively linked to successful leaders?
Oh, most definitely. You know, it was interesting when I studied curiosity, and just from interviewing 1,500 people, whoever I've, interviewed on my show, whether they were motivation experts, productivity experts, drive, engagement, innovation, you name it, whatever they were an expert in, I would ask them, what do they think comes first? And everyone would say curiosity. So I look at curiosity kind of like, think about if you were baking a cake. Okay, I'm going to tie it back to curiosity in a second. Okay, so if you're baking a cake, you're going to take the flour, the eggs, the oil, whatever it is you're mixing together, the ingredients, right? So you're mixing ingredients and you're putting it into a pan and you put it into the oven and you want your output to be cake, right? But if you didn't turn on the oven, you don't get cake, you get goo, because there's no spark to ignite what you want. And then the business world, if instead of cake, your output is productivity, money, okay, you all want that as your output, right? So we know the ingredients, we want motivation, we want drive, we want engagement and innovation, and everybody's mixing together all these ingredients of soft skills and leadership and all these things, but nobody's turning on the oven to bake the cake. Nobody's, and that spark, that oven is curiosity, because curiosity gets you out of status quo behaviors. And status quo is more what I was thinking, curiosity is, when they asked me to define it, and really it's not just about reading the 600 pages as Warren Buffett does, which is a great start. It's also about taking that information and utilizing it and getting out of doing things the same old way. Don't just read the same 600 pages, read new pages and this and look into that, because there's you may have seen a behavioral study that they showed where a woman went into a doctor's office thinking she's getting her eyes examined. But it was really a thought experiment, and they had cameras everywhere, and everybody around her, they were actors. And so she came in thinking it's a doctor's office. She sits down, and about every couple minutes, a bell would ring, And everybody around her would stand up and sit down without any explanation at all. And so she looks around, and all these people are standing up and sitting down every couple of minutes. And so after just the second or third time, I think it was the third time they did this, she stood up and sat down with them. And she doesn't know why she's doing it, but she does it because it's comfortable, right? Everybody else is doing it. I better be doing it. So she gets up and she sits down with them. And they thought, well, this is really fascinating because this is called social learning. People do what's comfortable because everybody else is doing it. So you don't know why you're doing it, but hey, okay, so I'm going to keep doing this. But then they decided, let's take these people out of the room and see what she does once they're all gone. So they call them back as if they're getting their eyes examined. And finally, she's alone. The bell goes off. She still stands up and sits down because now she thinks she's supposed to, right? And so she continues that. And they thought, well, let's add some people to the room who are real patients and see how they respond to what's going on. So they add a few people to the room and the bell goes off. She stands up and sits down. And the guy next to her looks at her, like, what's going on? And he looks at her and he says, why'd you do that? And she said, well, everybody else was doing it. I thought I was supposed to. Right. So what do you think he does the next time the bell rings, right? So he gets up and sits down, and everybody else does eventually, who they add to the room. And that's what we're doing in the workplace. We are standing up and we're sitting down and we have no idea why, right? We just keep doing the same things that everybody else is doing it. Must be a good thing to do. But that's going to be a problem. That's going to lead to the Kodaks of the world. And they took some great ideas and thought, well, this worked great in the past, so let's just keep doing it. But then the world passed them by. The Netflix of the world passed by, the Blockbusters. And, we have all these examples of companies that started to reinvent the workplace, the Ubers and others of the world, because they didn't do things the same way. And if we want to continue to survive and be successful, we have to know when to put things away. Ben and Jerry's is an ice cream. I don't know if you get it there, but it's a famous ice cream here. And what they have is some real wild flavors, and people love them. But they every once in a while they decide that a flavor is just not doing as well as it used to, and they give it a burial. If you go to their website, they have a site that shows headstones for the different flavors of ice cream that are no longer popular. And they celebrate it. They say, this is a great ice cream from this year to that year, but we don't make it anymore. But hey, let's celebrate its life, and we give it a funeral. And I think we need to give more things a funeral at work, because we're doing them for no reason and we don't know why.
Fantastic. I mean, so I always want us to talk about the context, the reality of the world right now. The COVID came in. And when we look at the world around us, we're almost in a moving train. Things are happening so fast, new innovations, self-driven cars, AI, robotics, and all of that. Let's look at the angle of individual, then we'll move into business, to the business world. What's the significance of curiosity to an individual in the world that we lead in right now, most especially when we look at trying to look at people's career and leading their lives better in this challenging time, in this ambiguous, uncertain time right now. What's the significance of curiosity?
Well, it's a really good question. And the fact is, we know from Gallup does a survey every year, and in the United States, we lose $550 billion a year due to low engagement. So that's basically meaning people go to work, they don't really love and aren't passionate about what they do. So they just kind of exist in their jobs, and they don't have a passion for it. And that costs companies a ton of money, but it's also costing the employee their desire to go to work, their desire to, grow and expand and be successful. Right before the COVID shutdown, I was in New York filming some videos for Verizon. And what they had me do was for their onboarding for new employees, and for a lot of other reasons, they had these videos that I would be in, and I talked about some of the value of curiosity. And then after I would speak, they would take an employee who was super curious and was successful within their company, and they would share the story of how they became successful at Verizon from doing whatever it was they did based on their curiosity. So what it does is if you develop your sense of curiosity, you get over a lot of the factors that inhibit curiosity. And what I found were the 4 factors that inhibit curiosity are the acronym of FATE, F-A-T-E. So that's fear, assumptions, which is really the voice in your head, technology, which is over and underutilization of it, and environment, which is, the impact everybody you've ever known has had on you. So if you could overcome these 4 factors that have been inhibited your curiosity, that leads, as I said, it's the spark to all these other things. And one of them, for example, is engagement. And engagement is your passion for what you do. Now, imagine if you were allowed to explore what you'd like at work and do things you'd really love at work, how much different work would seem to you, and how much more you would be aligned to a job that's really suited to what you would be passionate about, right? And the company wins in the end, because engagement, of course, as I said, they're losing 550 billion. If you're helping the company, you're also helping yourself by being aligned in the proper jobs. And as technology is taking over, and we're seeing new technologies and different jobs and different things happening due to COVID, right? So as that's changing, this is the time where we got to think, well, are we best aligned to what we would really love to do? And if we would be better aligned to something else, we need to use our curiosity to explore. The problem is a lot of us tell ourselves a lot of things that hold us back. And that's in FATE, the assumptions, right? We say, well, I'm not going to be good at that, or I never liked that in the past, or if I did that, I'd have to be perfect at it. And you get this monologue in your head that you think all these things that hold you back, and then you don't move forward. Now, if we allow ourselves to really let go of that fear, and that's the real key to a lot of this, is letting go. And I just an hour before this, I had a guest on my show, and he was from Ghana, and he was, he had very little money, and he got here on a very special award that he was able to get to the United States, and he learned this openness to experience, which is a huge part of curiosity, because he had seen what he didn't want to live like when he was in Ghana, and he saw what he could have in the United States. And I think that a lot of us aren't exposed to such dramatic differences. You get, you're raised in what you don't know, because you're raised in this bubble of what you've ever known. And so it's a very challenging time for us with COVID, because we're all kind of put into a new situation. Everything's done virtually, and we're not used to that. And so we're learning to accept some of the harder realities of change. But then I think, now that we know we've lived through it, we can do it. I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing to show us to question things and to find out new ways of doing things. Because like Zoom, I had one of the executives from Zoom, which is a very big video platform like this, on my show before COVID ever hit. And they had no idea how much that they were going to be thrust into this new world. And so think of all the people who didn't know even about Zoom, and think of the jobs you might want to have at that company or some other company that's all become uncovered due to maybe, this tragedy. So you don't know what's out there unless you explore. And that's what I'm trying to do, is to get people, young people, old people, everybody to explore, because the more we develop our sense of curiosity, not only do you find engagement, but you get, we release dopamine, which helps us feel better. And who doesn't want to feel better, especially throughout all of this?
I know. I mean, it's interesting. I I mean, that part of you know, engagement where you talked about it's a great one. Um, I was also reading a paper, a research, State of Curiosity, published by Merck, um, the pharmaceutical
Right.
yeah firm. Yeah, they also talked about curiosity. I mean, they did a lot of research. I mean, around that, and it was
Mhm.
discovered that highly curious employees, they're two times they get to be promoted two times more than an employee with a low level of curiosity. And I was trying to look at this within the workplace, within the business world.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. Merck did a lot of good research. They looked at how the curiosity was around the world, versus
Mm,
Germany and China and all the different things. There's a
yeah.
great study out there that if anybody's interested, you should look for that. But like you
Mm,
said, it does make a difference. I had Francesca Gino on my show, who's a Harvard professor, and she had some great research. If you ever get on HBR, the
yes.
Harvard Business Review,
Yes.
she had the case for curiosity study
Exactly.
that she published. And one thing that she saw was a lot of leaders think they're encouraging curiosity, but when you ask the employees who work for them, it's not the same level of what they think. And which is a problem though, because we want that to be, in alignment. So a lot of it is discovering if you really do embrace curiosity. And one of the studies I was involved in is they wanted to look at measuring curiosity levels as an initial baseline to see if it's high or low, medium, wherever it is. And then doing like the curiosity code index training, things that I do, and then taking the assessment afterwards to
Mm,
see the difference. And that's not unlike what that Novartis did. They looked at engagement numbers first,
mm,
they for the company,
mm,
and then they did curiosity training, and then they looked at engagement numbers again, and engagement went up and
mm,
considerably, right? So as we look at the data out there, as you said, there's these research studies that show the tie to all these important things. You're going to be promoted more. You'll be more content
mm.
because you'll be
Yeah.
aligned
Yeah.
to jobs
Yeah.
that you like better. You don't have to worry that you're going to lose your job because you have other options out there. There's a lot of facets. You'll feel better from the dopamine aspect. You'll want to go to work, and it's that it's the calming of the mind, the fear. We had a lot of bosses in the past who would say things like, "Don't come to me with problems unless you have solutions." I had a boss who even said, "I'll pretend I didn't hear that." Okay, when you have people say things like that to you, what does that do? That's going to shut down any questions. That's going to shut down any engagement. It's
Mm,
it's one
mm,
of the worst things you can do as a leader, but you don't know that because you're trained this way, right? We were told to ask these things, to say these things, because we don't want whiners. We don't want people coming to us without giving us solutions. But some people can recognize problems, but they're not qualified to give you the solutions, right? So
the
by
solutions.
telling, right. So we want to encourage people to tell us things. We want to, of course, you have to recognize the things that you're doing or even somebody else has done that have caused your people who work for you to have fear or have caused you to have fear. So recognizing your fear, it all kind of ties in. It's not just the fear, it's the assumptions that we make that tie into this fear. And when I talk to people, I'll sometimes hold up a bottle of water or something, and I'll say, "How much does this weigh?" And people yell out 16 ounces, 12 ounces, whatever they yell out. And I'll go, "It doesn't matter. What matters is how long I hold it, right? If I hold it for a minute, it's not that heavy. If I hold it for an hour, it gets to wear my arm down, right? If I hold it all, for a long, long time, my arm becomes paralyzed. And that's the same thing with our thoughts. A little while, no big deal. But if we are telling ourselves, "I'm not interested," "Oh, this is scary," and all these things we tell ourselves, then it starts to become more problematic and eventually we become paralyzed. So we need to put the water down, right? And so we have to recognize this though. And that's what I do with companies is I help them go through these steps of understanding what's holding them back and how to move forward past that. because it's not just our fear, it's not just our assumptions. It's, technology, a lot of us are over underutilizing it. As we overutilize it, we don't understand the basics behind it. You might be the greatest mathematician in the world, but I toss a calculator at you and you only know how to use a calculator and you don't know the foundation behind it. That's a problem. But if you're a great mathematician and you don't know how to program it into something else for people to advance and grow, that's underutilization of it. So we need to find a balance. And then on the environmental aspect, that's a huge problem for a lot of people, because think of that boss, for example, told you don't come to me with problems unless you have solutions. That's an environmental influence. You have your teachers who have to teach to the test. They have too many students in the class. They can't answer your questions. You have your parents that tell you children should be seen and not heard, or whatever it is that you have in your life, could be impacting your sense of exploration. And the first step to overcoming it is to look at those factors, look at your fear. What are you afraid of and why? Where did that start? Look at your assumptions. What are you telling yourself? What are you telling yourself it's going to be too hard? The last time I offered a suggestion, they put me the head of that committee and didn't pay me, so I don't want to say anything again, or whatever it is you're telling yourself. And then technology, how can you learn more foundations behind things, and what can you use to a better advantage? What are you thinking, oh, I don't want to learn again because I've learned it in the past? And then all those kinds of things you got to think about. And then in your environment, what did your family tell you? Everybody in your family needs to be an accountant, or everybody in your family should be a teacher, or did your teacher not answer your questions? Or recognizing that environmental influence, that you go along with things because your friends did, or you do things because you don't want to be the person who thinks differently. But if you do that, you could be taking a path that just kills your curiosity, kills your engagement, kills the innovation and all of your desires.
And all of that.
Yeah, so that's what, those are the four things you really need to be looking at.
I still want us to come back to the inhibitors of curiosity, because I still want us to come back to that. Let's just go to check a few of our viewers. Banji, hello, hi, how are you? I've been Bola Soluade from Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you so much. Simon Obianwa is saying very impressive topic. Thank you so much. I've been Bola Shitabe, Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you so much. Okay. Before we, I know you were talking about the curiosity inhibitors, but I also want us to talk about the fact that this also was about a research I ran into sometimes. I think in the course of even looking at what you've done, that an average 3-year-old sometimes asks about 100 questions per day.
Yeah. Feels like more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you find out that by the time they are about 10 to 11 years, these questions have reduced drastically. Could we say there's a relationship between age and curiosity?
Yes, there's a couple of really great video presentations if you guys have access to YouTube and TED Talks and that kind of thing. I think Sir Ken Robinson and George Land have two of the greater talks about the impact of age on creativity mostly, but it mirrors the same thing we see with curiosity. If you look at like Sir Ken Robinson's talk and George Land, they around age 5, we peak, and we're, like you were saying, there's all these questions, why, and kids want to know all these things, right? But you get into school and teachers don't always have the ability to answer every single question all the time. And so I think school, as Sir Ken Robinson had said, we kind of educate ourselves out of our competencies sometimes. And that's a problem. And so we find that it peaks, and around age 31 in George Land's study, we went from most of the kids, I think it was 98% of the kids were creative geniuses when they were 2 to the opposite. Almost none were creative geniuses when they're older. And the reason for this was what I was looking at with the FATE acronym, but it is tied to age, and a lot of it is our experiences that we go through. And as we age, we lose it, but that doesn't mean we can't get it back. It's like emotional intelligence. When I had Daniel Goleman, who's famous for all his TED Talks and everything he's done in emotional intelligence realm on my show, we talked about, this is something you can develop. You can build this. And he was saying, curiosity is the future, is a very important competency of the future. And to have somebody like that acknowledge how important it is, it's just showing that this is something we all need to be focusing on. We know that Google, yeah, because like Google gave their company, their people time, to explore pet projects and all that. And we don't really get that when we're young and you're in school. Nobody lets you go off and go, oh, you're interested in, blowing things up. You would be a great chemist, I mean, nobody's
Oh my
letting you do that,
God.
right?
Oh my God.
So
That
I
reminds me,
think,
what you just said now reminds me of, I mean, I have a 12-year-old, a
uh-huh,
10-year-old, and
uh-huh,
6-year-old.
uh-huh.
Most of the time I scream, don't go out, don't.
Well, it depends what he's doing, but I think sometimes we do that because we're like, we don't want them to hurt themselves, of course, but we want them to explore their passions as long as they're
Passion.
safe, right? And so I think Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, Steve Wozniak, he goes by Woz, is a very famous, interesting guy. When I met him, I found him endlessly interesting. But his
Interesting.
book, I Was, he talks a lot, and writes, I should say, a lot at the beginning about his childhood and how much his father fostered his desire to understand the complexities of electronics. His father used to be, I've read he's literally a rocket scientist. I'd have to verify that, but he had a pretty important job. And he came home with all these wires and gadgets and batteries and all this stuff from work, and he could have just said, here, Woz, go play in the corner, right? But instead he sat down with him and he goes, okay, so this wire brings electricity from this device and you need electricity to run this, and he went to detailed explanations at a kid level, of course, but he gave him drawings and diagrams and all this detail to help him really love the foundation behind the electronics. And that changed his life.
Yeah, I mean that's very important because like you said, the environment where a lot of us grew up actually shaped our level of curiosity today. But let me ask this question. So when we look at an average adult today, who probably has lost that trait of curiosity. So, how can an average adult retrain his or her brain to regain this trait? First of all, is curiosity trainable or is it learnable? Is it learnable? Then, if it's learnable, how can we begin to retrain our brain in order to develop this trait, this ability? I'm
You,
talking
you
about
know,
curiosity. Yeah.
yes, it definitely is trainable, learnable, all the things you mentioned. And that's why, but you have to begin with figuring out what holds you back. And to find that out, that's why I give my assessment that helps people determine where they are on a scale. I don't put them in a box like you're a D or an I or S or a C kind of thing. I say, here's your level in this area, in this area, in this area. And these are the kinds of things you can do to move forward. So if you want to develop in the area of fear, you might ask yourself, why don't you ask questions in meetings? What is it that you fear? Why don't you explore things? There's a lot of different why don't you, why can't you kind of questions you can ask yourself. And for assumptions, what do you tell yourself that won't interest you? What is the background behind that? And for technology, how are you over and underutilizing it? And for environment, who told you what you cared about didn't matter or they didn't have time for it, right? And as you face these kind of answers to things, then you can create smart, measurable goals to overcome some of these things, right? And so when I train companies, we go through this on an individual basis with every person figuring out their own issues and then how to fix it. And then we do it for the company as a whole. And as a whole, we're looking at, developing critical thinking, decision-making, leadership, conflict resolution, perception, adaptability, all the things that companies are having problems with, engagement, innovation. And we figure out from the horse's mouth, from the employees, we find out how we can improve things for the company as a whole. So the employees are actually giving advice to the leaders so that they can fix the entire company, which, Disney did something similar because, for Disneyland, Disney seems like the most exciting place in the world to work, but they actually have a laundry division. And as glamorous as it sounds to work in a laundry, it's not usually. And they found a lot of people were leaving. They had high turnover. And what they decided to do was go to the people who were still there and said, how can we make your job better? Simple question, a curious question, right? And as they fully expected probably to get things like buy me a Porsche and fly me to Hawaii, right? But they got really honest answers. They got things like put an air vent over my desk so I'm not so hot. Have my folding table go up and down so my back doesn't hurt so much. They got really helpful things. And so
helpful feedback.
So that's what we're doing for companies is we're giving them that kind of feedback from the employee level so that they can use that to develop the curiosity throughout the company, because curiosity has to be a core value in the culture of an organization. And for that to happen, leaders have to embrace it and demonstrate that they are curious and that they aren't afraid to ask questions. So they have to emulate what they want to see. And so for them to build curiosity in the rest of their employees, they have to say, hey, I'm going to ask a stupid question I normally wouldn't ask because I want to develop my curiosity and I want you guys to feel just as comfortable to ask these kinds of questions so that we don't look at any question as a stupid question.
That's very fantastic. I mean, that also reminds me, I know you've also talked about it, that Google has placed so much premium on curiosity as against intelligence. That's why part of the time is allotted to an average employee to explore their own, own thing. But now you talked about building a culture of curiosity, where you gave the example of Disney now. So how can organizations begin to foster this culture of curiosity?
Well, it's really fascinating to look at some of the companies like Disney. I mentioned Ben & Jerry's, Verizon, Novartis. I had the CEO of SurveyMonkey, Xander Lurie, was on my show. SurveyMonkey actually changed their address to One Curiosity Way or something to that effect because they embrace curiosity so much. I think, what it is asking questions. And if you promote that within just your meetings, for example, there's a hybrid bicycle company called Van Moof who was selling their bicycles, it's shipping them in packages that were causing some of the bikes to become broken and damaged when they got to the end location. And they wanted to fix this. And they thought, well, let's use our curiosity and come up with some ideas of what would fix this. And what the problem was they didn't have the money to spend to fix this, but they wanted to figure out a way to do it. So they looked and if they doubled the size of the package and you're doubling package costs, they don't want to do that. So they thought about everything. And eventually someone in leadership, it was, since they were encouraging curiosity, they got an idea from somebody in the group to look at other companies who shipped things in similar boxes and to see how their damage rates were. And what they found was their box was very similar to a flat screen television set. And the flat screen TVs were shipping fine without getting as damaged as nearly as often. And they're thinking, well, how does that happen? So what they did was they noticed that the only difference between their boxes was the flat screen TV had a picture of a flat screen printed on the box. So they thought, well, what would happen if we print a flat screen picture on our box? And they noticed that when they ship these boxes now, suddenly they weren't breaking as much because people are thinking there's a flat screen, I better take care of it, right? So, you know, it's that encouraging people to give outside the box thinking ideas and rewarding really good ideas. And no idea is a bad idea. And, you know, you may not use everybody's idea, but you have to say, let's think some way out. Like at a hospital, New Ormond Hospital in London was having a lot of problems with people dying after surgery on the transfer to the ICU after surgery. And so they found, like, tried everything, all the tried and true, the way we've always done things, methods, nothing worked, right? So a couple of the executives one night were watching Ferrari race car team, Formula One race car, were racing the track, and then they'd stop and then they'd change all their tires out and, you know, 7 seconds, put it all back together and go. And they watch that and they go, how can they do that in 7 seconds? And yet we are having a problem doing this. So they actually hired the Ferrari team to come back to the hospital to watch them, how they handled the patient transfers. And the Ferrari team gave a few suggestions, and it was a huge difference of what they were able to improve because they had outside fresh eyes. It's kind of like if, you know, somebody teaches you how to do something that you've been doing wrong all along, you only keep practicing the way you've known to practice hitting a ball, right? You don't know there's another way to do it unless somebody comes in and shows you. So leadership has to be open to looking outside their cubicle, outside their silos, outside their industry even, to get this curiosity. And they have to be open to thinking that the same old way of doing things might not be the best way of doing things.
The leadership has to be open. Yeah, so it has to be like a top-down approach, right?
Right. Well, it's very important because it's hard to change culture from the bottom up. You can get movements going and try, but if the leader at the top doesn't really understand the value of curiosity, that's a problem. And that's one of the reasons I had Keith Kroc wrote the foreword of my book. And he is the billionaire genius behind DocuSign, the electronic signature company that he was the chairman and CEO there. And he really embraced curiosity. And he was a leader there where he would surround himself with people who were very smart, and he wouldn't have tried to pretend he knew everything, but he probably did know everything because he's one of the smartest guys I've ever met. But he had that air to him, like everybody's input is valuable, and you have to have that sense as a leader that you have to welcome people, their input into discussions, and emulate what you want back. And if you're not doing that from the top, sometimes if you're working for a company where they're not doing that from the top, it's very hard to change it. And sometimes it's time to go somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good. Wow. I just want to show the, let me see if I can just project the, or quickly show the, I mean, for our viewers who probably would like to see the the curiosity in Ibitos, the feed. I don't know if you can see it now. The curiosity influencers. Yes.
Yeah.
The fear, the feet, right? The acronym is FEED. Oh, faith. Okay, faith. Yes. Fear.
I kind of like the feet one though. Yeah, it's fate.
Yes. Okay, faith. Okay. So fear, it's actually a big factor.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, it's interesting to look at the different factors because I looked at men versus women. Some in this studies. I studied men and women for years, thousands of people, and
Wow.
fear was a little bit more problematic for women than men. but it was pretty close on all of these. Actually, there was slight differences. For assumptions, it was a little bit more problematic for men than women, but technology was equal for both, and environment was a little bit more problematic for men than women. So, but it was so close that it was negligible. But what I found in another study on the men versus women aspect of this, which I find interesting, is, you know, Cambridge University and the PLOS1 study. They looked at how men and women respond after watching a seminar. So something like this, if it was a live event, for example, if I was to speak, men would be 2.5 times more likely to ask a question than
The
women would be.
question.
Yeah, and women didn't like challenging the speaker. If they saw something on a slide that is wrong, they would just assume maybe they misunderstood, instead of where a guy might say, "Hey, you got something wrong up there, right?" And so their men are more likely to point out mistakes, and they have no problem really starting with asking questions, where women feel a lot more comfortable waiting for maybe 6 or more questions to be asked. And then men were more, their curiosity was based on the joy of just academic knowledge, where women like the experience of it in more than achievement. So, you know, it's very interesting. I speak to some women's groups, and I often share a slide where some of the top women leaders in the world, including Oprah and Mae Jemison, which is the first African-American woman astronaut, and a lot of others that were CEOs at like Lockheed Martin, IBM, you name, top companies, Walmart, you name them. And all these women, when they asked them what they believed made them successful, almost without fail, they listed curiosity, or a word close to curiosity, intellectual curiosity, or challenging the status quo, or openness, you know, asking questions, you know, however they put it, they all put it that way. And so a lot of them had to overcome all these factors that, right, and that's the first step. If you don't know what's stopping you, it's very hard to move forward. So fate is stopping you, or feet.
Let's quickly talk about this technology. How does technology pose serve as an inhibitor to curiosity?
Well, it can be. It can also help your curiosity. Sometimes you might ask Siri or Alexa, or she's probably going to turn on when I say that, so you may hear her in the background. But you may ask one of these devices everything, but not really explore anything in any kind of depth, and not know the background behind it. So there's a balance. I think in the working world, we need to have high curiosity, low tech days, and high curiosity, high tech days. So like, maybe this, on the low tech days, we learn the foundation behind things, why this software works, what's behind the screen, you know what I mean? And then on the high tech days, how can we use this really great technology to build something, to grow, to do something more with it? So some days do things manually, some days use the technology to the fullest, and find out why things are happening. Kind of like my explanation of the calculator. If you don't know the math, the calculator doesn't really lead you to be the next great Einstein, right? So if we want our kids to be the next Einstein, we don't want to just hand them the calculator. We want them to have that foundation of knowledge. And so that's why, once you have that foundation of knowledge, and then you take that technology, and then you build the next great technology from that technology, that's what we want. We want to go both directions.
Simon is asking a question here. I mean, let's just attend to one or two questions before we call it a day. Simon is asking, how can a person improve his or her curiosity level? I think the faith.
Well, the first thing you start is with faith. You recognize those factors, right? And people can take the assessment on my site, which is drdianehamilton.com or curiositycode.com. Either one will get you to that. But if you don't want to take an assessment, you can, start with asking yourself some questions. why don't you ask questions in meetings or at work, or what is holding you back from
Wow.
exploration, and start writing down some of those answers to some of the based things.
Mm,
And because fear, I think it's really important to look at the things that are fear. Fear is you fear failure, you feel embarrassment, you fear loss of control,
mm,
right? So
mm,
write down what things you fear failing at, what you're embarrassed by, in the workplace, and those kinds of things, and what kind of
mm,
loss of control, and what's the alternative to that. And then when you're doing the same thing for assumptions,
mm,
what are you telling yourself you're not going to be interested in, or what do you find boring or unnecessary, or what do
mm,
you think that's going to happen if you do it, and what if things in your mind, and start writing down those things that are holding you back. And then for
wow.
technology, what are you overusing? What are you underutilizing? What are you letting do it for you? What are you not trained to do? What do you find overwhelming? And then an
Mm,
environment, what impact has your education, your family, your friends, your workers, what have they told you that made you go in a direction that maybe doesn't interest you as much? And so
mm,
now that you've got those things, then
mm,
you do kind of a SWOT analysis, a personal SWOT
mm,
analysis. You create this. My weaknesses and my threats are these things. I have this issue with fear, I have this issue with assumptions and whatever. And then you look at who could help you. Could your family help
mm,
you? What could help you? Could it help to read about something new? Could it help to drive a different way to work? Could it help to read a
mm,
different section in the newspaper? Could it help to do, ask certain questions at a workplace? Could it help to present
mm,
in a situation
mm,
to build your critical thinking skills? And so you create these smart personal goals, and, smart, the measurable type of goals, where by Friday of every month, I will have done XYZ number of presentations, or I would have read this much by this date. And you have these SMART goals, and then you refine them as needed as you go through, and build them as you go along.
mm.
I can
Yeah.
see his question about not asking questions at meetings. Can it be attributed to a lack of knowledge about the topic under discussion, or lack of curiosity? See, that's the thing. If you have the question, a lot of other people have the questions, right? And so you may
Mm,
not have the knowledge, but maybe other people don't have the knowledge as well.
mm,
So
mm.
if you don't understand something, it's important to feel like you can ask a question. You may not
Question.
know really
Mm.
deep questions to ask if you lack knowledge, but you could
Knowledge.
say, hey, I may be the only one who's asking this, but I'm very curious to know XYZ question. And if you can even preface it if you feel uncomfortable, and say, I'm trying to develop my sense of curiosity, because some people are
Mm.
afraid that um, they're going to insult the person that you're
Yeah.
questioning them, right?
Mm.
So this is, you delivered that great talk, thank you very much, but I'm just trying to develop my sense of curiosity, and it could
Mm.
be that I don't understand this XYZ thing, but
Mm.
what happens when, and then ask your question to see what they
Question.
say.
Mm.
And if you diffuse your question, they see your reason for asking it. They appreciate that you're trying to develop curiosity. They realize
Mm.
that you're not confronting that they don't know something, that you're just building up your own knowledge. And
Mm.
it's an effective way to ask the question.
Mm. Mm. That's fantastic. Wow. This is awesome. This is awesome. I mean, I've also seen a lot of questions in my inbox, but because of time, we may not be able to attend to some of those questions. But I know that a lot of people will still come and drop some of their questions in the comments box and all of that. Dr. Diane, I am so grateful.
Oh,
Thank
well, I
you
am grateful
so.
that you had me here. This was really fun. I think your group asked some great questions. I hope you guys, you can always ask questions on social media. You can find me at Dr. Diane Hamilton. So that's just
Yeah.
DrDianeHamilton. And, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I think it's great that you guys did ask some really good ones here too.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, for being generous with your time. I know you've also
Welcome.
had a very long day on your show and creating that time for me to have this session. I mean, I must thank you for that. I'm
Welcome.
so grateful. I mean, coming to discuss this very interesting topic on curiosity with me and to people out there. Thank you
Oh, well,
so
you're
much.
welcome.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you for
That's it.
having me. You have a great
Yeah,
show.
thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's the end of episode 12. And it happens that I mean, by tomorrow, it will be exactly 1 year that I started this show out of curiosity.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.